Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and I have a clogged sink. I spent at least 30 minutes yesterday with all this nasty gunk in my kitchen sink with a plunger. I know it's hard to imagine the Digital Asset Investor plunging, but I was plunging and plunging and plunging for 30 minutes, and I could not get loose whatever it was, and so I had to call a plumber, and I don't think plumbers are social distancing right now because this guy said that he was booked all of today. So I have to have a clogged sink all of today, and then tomorrow he's going to unclog my sink. So that's at least halfway good news. But I don't know what it is because I've got one of those plungers that really does the trick, and like one of those industrial type plungers, and it just wouldn't do anything. So I guess we're going to have to snake drains or something. But anyway. Okay, here we go. I got this from Michelle Vandenberg. There's a lot of just creepy economic news right now. But the first thing I wanted to show is this from this guy, John Kiff. I don't know who this is, but anyway, let's see what it says. IMF Senior Financial Sector Expert. Okay, that's interesting. I'll follow him. The Dutch Central Bank said today that it would like to experiment with digital currency issued by itself and other European central banks as the use of cash rapidly diminishes. So you can see these guys are hitting it looks like they're going to try anything and everything because they know they're in a disaster. And then there was this tweet. The New York Fed's weekly economic index has dropped so sharply it makes 2009 look like an economic hiccup. I mean, we are really in some terrifying times right now as far as the economy goes. And in the end, I believe that there's only two escape routes. One is precious metals, and the other is crypto, preferably a digital asset like XRP with actual utility. Remember, when I say a digital asset with actual utility, what I mean is, and I said it yesterday, there's really two camps, I think, in people that really understand XRP. There's two camps. One camp believes that the value of XRP rises slowly like a bathtub. The other camp that I'm in believes it rises slowly from utility like a bathtub the same way, but at some point speculators see that and say, wait a minute, this might be an asset with a floor that's a rising floor that never goes back down, and then they pour in. That's the reason that this is such a monumental time in history, in the history of finance. Okay, so you've got basically oil has gone below zero. Unbelievable. So in other words, you want to buy a barrel of oil, they have to pay you to take a barrel of oil at this point. Unbelievable. Who would have thought? Oil collapsed today. This is from Ben Rickert. Now he gets this. This name comes from the Big Short movie. I highly recommend any of you that are living through this right now, watch the Big Short movie if you've never watched it. It's about the 2008 financial crisis and the people that bet on the right bet during that nightmare. Listen to this. This is Vladimir Putin.
Пользовался очень большим доверием во всем мире. Это почти единственная была универсальная валюта мировая. Зачем-то Соединенные Штаты начали использовать долларовые расчеты как инструмент политической борьбы. Вводите ограничения на использование доллара. Своими руками начали пилить сук, на котором сидят. Но скоро они грохнутся. Доллары сокращаются как резервная валюта во многих государствах мира. Иран ограничивает в долларовых расчетах, на Россию вводит какие-то ограничения, на другие страны. Это подрывает доверие к доллару. Неужели это непонятно? Своими руками уничтожают доллар.
Look, let's face it. The only reason the dollar is what it is at this point is one word, and he said it there, confidence. The United States has done everything in its power. They say they want it to be strong and all, but they've done everything in its power to create a lack of confidence around the world in the U.S. dollar. They have abused the power that goes with being the world's reserve currency, and that's just the fact, Jack. Okay, it just is. So regardless of what you think about Vladimir Putin or Russia or China or anybody else, the fact is that the United States has done this to themselves. The predicament we're in, the central bankers of the world have done this to themselves. They can blame the current events, but ultimately the central bankers they put us in the place where we are now. I believe that those same bankers are are responsible for the creation of digital assets. I truly believe that. I believe that they saw the nightmare that they had created coming. I believe the 2008 financial crisis was the flashpoint, and they finally said, "Here we go. We got to do something." And I've gone through who I think was involved and all the banks and who, that kind of stuff in other videos. Okay, now let's look at this. XRP Crypto Wolf. The US dollar ate every other fiat currency. Then it began to eat itself. In this phase of eating itself in this dollar super spike, it's going to break the whole system. I think that we're going to have to move to something new. And then there was this, the gold telegraph. Think about this. This is creepy too. Oh, Canada. The Canada Pension Plan Investment Board has more than $4 billion invested in the top 200 publicly traded oil, gas, and coal companies. The investment board responsible for managing a staggering $400 billion in Canadian pensions. I mean, I've said this a lot on this channel too. Pensions, this idea of Social Security pensions, the idea that all of these people they can manage your investments better than you could. All that means is that they're the ones holding the money and controlling the money. And if someone else controls your savings, they're not your savings, they're somebody else's savings. But look no further than Social Security. The original premise of Social Security was the government's smarter than you are, and they're going to force you to invest. But anybody with a half a brain knows how that ends. It ends the way that it did end, and that is the United States, who was not supposed to touch your Social Security, eventually dipped their greedy hands into it, and now it's more or less bankrupt, and everybody knows it. All right, so now we've got this from Sven Hendrich. Negative rates. Mortgage companies pay us to live in our homes. Negative oil. Gas stations pay us to fill up. The Fed will save them all. Who needs a job anyways? This is how crazy it's gotten. Okay, now this is one of the most important tweets that Ripple has ever tweeted. Yesterday, I was literally watching it, and then I got on the phone with some people that I know. I do mean the second that oil, it's like Ripple had their finger on the button to tweet this out. The second that oil went negative, and I do mean the second that oil went negative, Ripple tweeted out this article, and that's when I said there are no coincidences. I believe Ripple had this article ready to go. I think it's pretty obvious. And here's, well, shoot, I just lost the tweet. But anyway, I need to go. Anyway, anyway, the tweet basically was talking about what Brianna Madigan said about liquidity in this article. It says, we are watching history unfold similar to the 2008 financial crisis. Books will be written about the events that are transpiring in the global markets today. But just like the 2008 financial crisis, collectively, industries will grow stronger. It's more critical than ever to provide education around the fundamentals of liquidity and its importance to global markets. So here, and this I thought was interesting that they brought this up. The marketplace for U.S. Treasury bonds represents an example of this. Banks serve as middlemen in the market, matching buyers and sellers. Traditionally, when the stock market declines, investors flock to the bond market as a safe haven alternative. This increased activity results in a highly liquid market where it is easy to match buyers and sellers because the difference between prices offered by sellers and sought by buyers are very small. Today, this is important. Today, we are seeing a rare mismatch in this bond market because of fallout effects from the current events. Sellers are dumping equities and bonds, and many investors are sidelined. Excuse me. This creates a gap that leads to an illiquid market where banks have difficulty connecting buyers and sellers. Now, folks, I've talked to you on this channel about this a lot. What they're saying right there is there's a couple. Traditionally, safe havens have been the Swiss franc, precious metals, and treasury bonds. When people get scared, they go to those things. But I've said 1,000 times on this channel, at some point, people are going to lose faith in those treasury bonds because of all the the things we've talked about, the money printing and all the ridiculous QE this, QE that done by the federal government. Now, so Ripple is pointing to exactly that right now. So the question is, in terms of safe havens, what happens when when that trust is lost? What happens when that trust is lost? It's going to go to the final things that can be trusted. Precious metals that and crypto, specific crypto, things that are actually useful and things that they can't make more of, that are limited in amount. XRP, there will never be more than 100 billion. But then they go on, and I want to, this is my favorite quote out of this. As a bridging tool in ODL, the greater liquidity of XRP, the less cost and risk in each transaction. XRP is perfectly positioned for this freaking nightmare that has been created. The current events that are going on, that was only a flashpoint, folks. That is not what created the mess we're in. They can conveniently blame the current events, but look, this problem has been created over the course of decades by all these people. That's a fact. Another fact, Jack. Okay. Then XRP Crypto Wolf came in and tweeted this. Ripple's Brianna Madigan said, continuous utility will foster liquidity depth and market health around XRP. The more value transfer problems it helps to solve and payment frictions it helps to reduce, the more diverse and efficient the adoption of XRP as a global payment asset will become. All right, let's move along. And then I tweeted, this is my favorite tweet out of the article, and I tweeted this with an older David Schwartz tweet. It can't be dirt cheap. That doesn't make any sense. If XRP costs $1, they need 1 million XRP, which would cost $1 million. If XRP cost $1 million, they'd need 1 XRP, which would again cost $1 million. Except that higher prices make payments cheaper. Right now, you can buy $1 million house with Bitcoins. When Bitcoins were $300, it would move the market too much and be too expensive to be practical. So higher prices make payments cheaper. I thought those were interesting points that he made. And then we got this from Frank Chaparro, Goldman. Late payment rates and other leading indicators of distress are increasing across many U.S. Securitized credit sectors. Commercial mortgage late payment rates spiked up in April, led by hotel and retail properties, and auto loan delinquency rates increased in April. And then he's got a graph here that shows what's been going on. This is I can't say it enough. This is a nightmare. Okay, and then Caitlin Long said this. Today we saw that oil without the ability to store it changes that oil from an asset to a liability. Bonds will experience something similar one of these days. Rates at zero and repayment in debased money changes a bond from an asset to a liability. That is pretty profound, folks. All right, now I want to switch gears. Many of you may or may not know, Dan Moorhead is the guy that runs Pantera Capital, who was one of the original investors in Ripple. I'm going to show you some of his other investments. He's invested in Bakkt. He's invested in Bitstamp. I think he was one of the guys that started Bitstamp. Coins PH, which is one of Ripple's liquidity providers. He's invested in Circle, which is backed by Goldman Sachs too. He's invested in ErisX. He's invested in Ripple, you see, and then Zcash. So anyway, he's all over the place. He's kind of like the digital currency group. He was one of the first there, and he's heavily invested in all sorts of companies, most of the major companies in blockchain. Before I show you the video from him, I wanted to show you a little bit about him. The first thing you have to understand about him is that he's kind of like Mike Novogratz. He also was an early investor in Ripple. And I believe that he has a similar philosophy to Mike Novogratz. I think these guys are both so heavily invested in Bitcoin. I believe personally that the Bitcoin landscape has changed a bit. I believe these guys thought from day one that was going to be their first lick as far as investing. And for that reason, they carry this Bitcoin torch very loud. Now, I think that Bitcoin's going to do just fine. I just think that they thought it was going to happen sooner. And in fact, Mike Novogratz recently said he would bail on Bitcoin if it didn't happen this year. He actually made a comment to that effect. But I think both of these guys, they see XRP as the longer play, but I think that they both know what's going to happen, but it doesn't work for their shorter term strategy for them to run around talking about XRP. That's what I believe about these guys. But let's look at Dan Moorhead a little bit. He founded Pantera. He was the chairman at Bitstamp, board member at BitPesa. But anyway, if you go through it, he was at Deutsche Bank, Bankers Trust. He was also at Goldman Sachs. That tells you a lot right there. And then this is a tweet he did recently. I've spent 35 years trading global macro disruptions. This is like no other. This will certainly end the longest global expansion on record. Bitcoin was born in the financial crisis. It will come of age in this one. Here are my thoughts. Anyway, showing this chart here. Now, I'm going to go and show you a few clips. This is from an interview on April 16th with Real Vision Finance. First clip I wanted to show you is
where
here.
You can still go, to Safeway, pump $400 in the machine and have it pop out the other end. And so I think you're going to see some use cases where blockchain really kind of comes of its own in this crisis.
And so how are you seeing the space evolve? And things must be accelerating. I've always thought of it as it's like a hive mind of people developing an entirely new architecture. It's not just a financial architecture, it's an ownership architecture, it's a trust architecture. It's a number of things. And it feels like there's a hive mind of some of the smartest people I know are all focused on it. It's a huge group of people. What are you seeing that's kind of surfacing now out of this that's getting your interest?
Yeah, so the way I'd say it is in our 7 years of investing, we've seen a bunch of different eras. And the first year was all about just exchanges and custodians and really basic, ways to buy Bitcoin and then ultimately, Ripple and ETH and other things and store it. And so that was kind of our first year or two's investments. And then the next level is using cryptocurrency, and in most cases it was Bitcoin originally, to do some kind of cross-border money movement thing. And so we're invested in probably 12 or 15 companies around the world that help people move money across borders. And that's the thing that's really coming into its own right now. It's really been effective. If you think about it, the average cost of remittance right now for the hundreds of millions of people that migrate to earn money for their families is 9%. And you and I are in the financial markets, 900 basis points, whatever, it's just a number. But that's a month's wages, right? The migrant spends an entire month working for their remittance company, and their family only gets 11 months' wages. So the companies that are doing it with blockchain essentially are kind of the interregnum solution. Like ultimately people will just have blockchain on their phone and they won't need a company in the middle. But for the next 10 or 15 years, they're going to use these companies that charge, say, 2 or 3%. And they're seeing very, very strong growth.
Okay. And then I want to show you another clip here at I think it's the 2650. Here we go.
The existing system.
And how about custody? Because custody is one of the things that worries me in a solvency crisis, as you and I have gone through many times, is who owns all the shit in the end is one of the hardest questions to solve. How is the space working on this issue? Because, trusted ownership is one of the great things about blockchain. Who's doing that for the securities industry and all of the kind of assets that we all own in this?
In crypto, you're essentially custodying a password, right? You're really just trying to keep custody of the private key that can move the cryptocurrency itself. And the custodians in the industry, like Fidelity or Coinbase or Bakkt or BitGo, the hugely important thing about them is they employ no leverage. In the fiat system, you have, Lehman Brothers or whomever that are employing, 40-to-1 leverage across their balance sheet. So when something bad happens, problems that have nothing to do with the assets they're trying to custody essentially just wipe through everything on their balance sheet. And so I think the hugely different scenario here is blockchain custodians aren't levered, so there's no kind of systemic risk. And then they're normally essentially isolated from the financial markets. And there was a time when the biggest custodian in the space, which at Mt. Gox, which at the time had 85% of the market cap, they went under essentially without a ripple. The price of Bitcoin was up a week later. There's no federal bailout of Mt. Gox. So it's because they're unlevered and not backstopped by the government that essentially keeps them safer.
And what?
All right, and then I have one. Now that was an interesting clip to me because he was explaining how crypto custody is not subject to the same systemic risk that traditional custody and traditional finance is. That is huge, and that is what I believe the reason that they're all here, the reason Wall Street is at this party. Okay, let's see. The next clip is right here. Let's see, third.
Your remittance company, that's broken. So I think it will transition to a blockchain, but I think it's going to take a decade. There are some really exciting projects people are trying to do in the space, but as a firm, we've essentially passed on all the centralized Wall Street back office blockchain projects.
So there's several big ecosystems out there between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, EOS. How do you see the evolution of those, and how do they all play together? I'm incredibly concerned how tribal it all is right now, but I kind of know in a pragmatic world that there's a space for everybody. What's your view on all of that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. I'm sure there's going to be some great movies made about this someday. I would say there isn't a space for everybody, but there isn't a winner take all. And so that's a really frustrating kind of lukewarm water answer to your question, is that we have 2,000 tokens right now. I don't think we're going to have 2,000, and I don't think we're going to have just one. And there is a bit of a almost religious fervor in this space where, you know, the disciples of one group will be, you know, really, really excited about the other group. And so the punchline of this whole long diatribes, I think there's going to be a single digit number of very important blockchains. Each one's going to have its own use case. And it's already starting to shape up where you're seeing, Bitcoin not really change very much, but be really good at storing wealth. And so people like to call it digital gold, and I'm fine with that. You see Ethereum be really dynamic, and they're already going to Ethereum 2.0, and it's really changing, really ambitious. And then you have kind of the next generation of things like Polkadot that are coming, that are doing very ambitious things. And then Ripple's taken a kind of enterprise SaaS version of this and trying to work with all the banks and work with all the regulators to essentially replace SWIFT. They probably don't like it when I say it like that, but I think it's the easiest shorthand for what they're trying to do. So I think there's space for, 8 or 10 of those use cases in the long run. We're not going to, but the main point is we're not going to have, hundreds and hundreds of, very similar, quote, altcoins.
I don't think Ripple has any problem at all with him saying that they want to replace SWIFT. I think they've been pretty bold about it, surprisingly bold about it. Anyway, I think this guy is a very smart guy. But I do think that he's like Novogratz. I think that Bitcoin is their first play, and they know that XRP is going after a much larger thing, and I think they know that replacing SWIFT is no small order. And I think that for that reason, they tout Bitcoin from the rooftop. There's a part of me from listening to him and Novogratz that wonders if they understand the day-to-day of what Ripple has been accomplishing, as well as you and I do, being here, talking about it every day. I think these guys are a lot more detached from it, even as early investors, than you might think. That's just my observation. Before I leave, Dan Moorhead, it's always interesting to go back to their tweets about Ripple and XRP. So I went back and searched where he has tweeted about anything about Ripple or XRP. So here we go. In 2017, July, he tweets out this article from CNBC. It's not Bitcoin or Ethereum. This digital currency rose 3,977% in the first half of 2017. Then he says, congrats, Ripple, on being granted the second BIT license in New York. That was in June 14th, 2016. Then on March 31st, 2017, he says, Ripple continues to bring Internet of Value to life. New features increase transaction throughout same level as Visa. Then he says 2 of the 5 hottest companies in fintech. It's a Ripple Fortune article. And then he said, tweeted this one in 2016. Big banks invest $55 million in blockchain startup Ripple's Series B. Then he tweeted this out. Blockchain, this is in 2018, the shipping container for money. I love that slogan. That might be in my title. And blockchain as an internet of value. Great presentation from Chris Larson. So he's giving a shout out to Chris Larson. Then he says, then he did it again here. Money hasn't had its shipping container moment from Chris Larson. So he's tweeting that out. This guy knows. I just think he has seen, I don't know about now. I think now things are a lot more imminent maybe than even he thought they were going to be. But I think it was just an interesting exercise to go through Dan Moorhead and show you kind of, we've got a lot of new people here. So interesting stuff. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button. Tell your friends and family that Dan Moorhead is a pretty smart guy and he knows what's coming. Thanks for listening.